This from Marcel on Blue Sky. After scoring 4 goals in consecutive matches, are we back to seeing Jude Bellingham at his best, Lars?
I mean, I saw a quote from him saying something along the lines of he's got the sniff for goals again or something. He's got the sniff was the phrase. And I was like, I wasn't aware that was it. Maybe that's how the young people talk. The sniff. Is it up there with the ick? Who knows? I don't know a lot of young people. It was good. It's good. I think back to his best. I think he got some unfair stick earlier in the season for not scoring goals, just because I think that was more a consequence of his role in the team more than anything. I think he was hanging back and protecting that midfield a little bit more. Against Atalanta, you started Valverde centrally, which I think Valverde was very excited about because he's also, been played out of position a lot. And Ceballos in midfield as well. Not exactly a Galactico, but maybe that added a little bit more balance behind Bellingham, and he was free to go forward a little bit more in that game. That is a possibility. But I just think he's a guy who offers so much. And the fact that he scored all those goals last year was not really the plan. Like, he almost filled in as a striker because of Karim Benzema leaving very suddenly. And I feel like that kind of set the bar somewhere in terms of goal scoring where maybe it shouldn't have been in the first place. I see him much more as like a complete midfielder than someone who is an out-and-out goal-scoring type of guy. It's just, it turns out that is something he can also do. So I think the criticism was pretty unfair to begin with, really.
Yeah, he has reacted to that in a couple of interviews I saw after the Atalanta game, like you, Lars. And he was like, well, are you saying if I'm not scoring goals, I'm not any good? And I think he's right to be affronted by that. I really do, because I think equating his excellence just to goals, as you say, it's ludicrous, really. It is a positional thing, though, I think, as well as like him feeling it at the moment, if you like. And we talked about how in the long term, in the medium to long term, the short absence of Vinicius might actually benefit Real Madrid, because this was at a point where finally Ancelotti was getting to work on the relationship between Mbappe and Bellingham. He wanted to get them closer together. And I think the removal of Vinicius made this a little bit easier. Now, if you go back to the away game at Leganes, where they won quite comfortably, and Ancelotti makes a clear move to get Bellingham closer to Mbappe. So they play it's sort of a 4-4-2, and funnily enough, Bellingham ends up playing a similar position to the one that Javier Pastore played under Ancelotti at Paris Saint-Germain, where it's a 4-4-2, but you've got someone with playmakerish qualities as not really a left winger, but a sort of left-sided midfielder. Now, with Mbappe being the left of the front two as well, that really worked. And if you go through the first dozen games of the season or so, I think I said this before on OTC, but you had Mbappe and Bellingham completing passes to each other at an average of 3 a game. Now, in the last couple of weeks, that's gone up to 11 or 12, and that's far more like it. There's a million tactical plans you can make, but ultimately, life is going to be a lot easier if you can get your best players to not occupy the same space, but share consecutive spaces. And I think that has really worked. I don't think it's any coincidence that since Ancelotti's had this little tinker, which obviously he'll never get the credit for because, he's just a whisperer. He doesn't know anything about tactics. I think it's really made a difference to both of those players. And in terms of goals, I think for Bellingham, you can tell it is about confidence as well. He is feeding it at the moment. So I don't know if I'd say better form. Like Lars, I don't know if I'd say more productive form even. But yeah, he's starting to find goals again, and it's obviously a plus for them.
This is from Barry on Instagram. After starting the season so brightly, are people right to call Juventus the most boring team now?
Well, this is a team that could do with getting the sniff. No, we're coming straight off them beating Man City 2-0, which is obviously something they're going to be happy about. You can insert your joke about Man City's form here if you want, but it's still a good scalp. The thing about Juventus, there have been a lot of Juventus games this season that I have kind of tried to watch, and then my mind has started drifting, and I've started doing something else because they haven't been great to watch. It's true. They are sixth in the table. They're just 4 points off of third, so it's not a total disaster. They're undefeated, kind of weirdly, but there are 9 draws in there. You shouldn't be on 9 draws for the season in December. That's not ideal. But if you want to be sort of glass half full on this is not the Juventus of like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when they were handing out big contracts to big established players. They're trying to build, they've completely changed their approach.
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Well, yeah, him being the top of the thing, but there were others. And this is not the team that sort of, when Higuain was kind of firing Napoli, they just, we'll just buy you then. Like, this is not how they're operating now. They're trying to build a team based more on youth, based more on being savvy, based on using their academy. And they've hired a really interesting coach in Thiago Motta, who did really good stuff with Bologna last season. Now, it hasn't been amazing so far, but on the other hand, they're still undefeated. It's taking him some time to implement the things he wants to do, but they're still in touch with the battle for the Champions League race, even if maybe the title's probably out of the question. But it could have been worse, I think. It's not what you want to hear as a Juventus fan, having watched some of those games this season. It could have been worse, but it's true. I think it could have been worse. And it was always likely to take some time for Thiago Motta to be able to implement his style on this group and to go through that awkward early period whilst actually not losing any games in the league and taking a couple of scalps in Europe and still being in touch with where you want to be in the table. It's not a total disaster, but I agree, it's not been great to watch all the time.
Yeah, Fonseca called the draw with Milan one of the most boring games of his career.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that was true. I didn't watch that one, but I'm sure that was true. I've had another couple of unpleasant experiences trying to watch Juventus. So I'm not disputing that side of it at all.
It was forgettable, but that particular game. But I would stand up for Juventus a little bit, actually.
I thought that's what I was doing.
I think. Yeah, they're really grateful. I've got a text here from Thiago Motta. It says, "Tell Lars thanks."
Yeah. Not terrible.
Yeah, not
terrible. Not great, not terrible.
I think the point that you made about them building something is right. I mean, if you look at the team that played against Manchester City, and it's been the case all season, Danilo's the only guy who's even 30 in the team, and that does make a difference. The other thing about Thiago Motta, even though he's a young coach with interesting ideas, he is quite a cautious one. And I think maybe people who looked at Bologna's achievements from a distance, but maybe didn't watch them on that regular basis, might have missed that. It was never thrilling football at Bologna. It was effective football. It was interesting football. I think the way you use some of the players, obviously Joshua Zirkzee being one of them, was interesting for their development. And, maybe we're getting something similar with Kenan Yildiz, who's not got himself until recent weeks into so many goal-scoring positions, but been a really useful attacking conduit for the team. But I think at moments they've been really exciting. You look at the some of the Champions League form in particular, the opening win over PSV Eindhoven, or when they went to Leipzig and came back with 10 men, although, as Lars said in the main show this week, simply everyone's beating RB Leipzig at the moment in the Champions League. But I do think there is a difference to be made between defending properly and being boring. I think Juventus just about fall onto the former side. I think there's a lot to make them worth watching. And obviously, I think if they had a backup centre forward of some sort of quality, it would really help. They found it hard to get it over the line, especially in home games. Most of those draws have been at home, really. And when Vlahovic isn't on it or available or entirely fit, they've got a bit of a problem, really. That backup centre forward, obviously, that's easy for me to say from a distance because that would be the most expensive additional piece they could add. But I think it's quite vital to them, and I think it could be the difference between them making the Champions League or not. So, I think that would maybe change the image of them as well if they turn some of these draws into wins. But look, it's not Allegri sort of football, but there's something for Juventus fans to look at now and think, okay, this is a side that's interesting. This is a side that I can get invested in. I think they play the best football of any Juventus team that I've watched for a while.
Well, I mean, that's the key, isn't it? If Allegri was still there, the team drawing all the time, but being solid at the back, but not creating much, that would be the plan. Like that would be the intention. They would go, "What are you talking about? This is good. This is what we want to do." Whereas here, we're in the beginning of trying to build something more interesting, and they're managing to not. They have the lowest XG against in Serie A so far, so they're managing to keep that defensive fundament whilst feeling their way down the other end a little bit. So yeah, I'm kind of still vaguely positive about Juventus.
Yeah, this question from Chandler on X: what does Christian Pulisic's injury mean for Milan going forward, and just how good was Captain America playing before the calf injury?
Well, I think he's really been their main attacking player this season, and I mean, that sort of tells you two things. A, that finally, at the age of 26, and it shocks me still to say out loud that Christian Pulisic is 26, that he's found that capacity to lead a team. And I think he's got himself super fit. He takes responsibility at all moments. It's not just goals, it's assists. He's been really, really good this season. I think obviously part of the reason he stood out is because Rafael Leao hasn't. And has had this difficult start to his relationship, at least with Paulo Fonseca. It seems to have calmed down a little bit. And also, Leao has played better in recent weeks, much better. In terms of him missing for the moment, I mean, it could have a profound effect on Milan's season. Because Lars talked about Juventus just about being in touch with the top bracket of clubs. But there's the same problem in Serie A as there has been for a number of seasons. There are basically a lot of good teams scrapping for not quite enough European places, or at least European places in the best competitions. Milan are in a position at the moment where, Juventus is sixth, as Lars says, but, they're kind of in touch. Milan are a further 5 points behind after what's been their worst start in 4 or 5 years. That means they have... maybe it's because I'm sitting here in Lyon Airport that I feel like the need to use this phrase. But as the French would say, they've grilled all their jokers already. They don't really have any more rabbits in the hat. They can't afford any more slips. Basically, that's the problem. So, in terms of a player like Pulisic who can make the difference in tight games where you've not played particularly well, his absence is going to hurt unless Leao pulls out his best form all the time.
I want to know more about the sort of etymology of the phrase "grilled all their jokers." Where does that come from?
Well,
do they grill people who make a lot of jokes in France? Seems bad.
I think it means joker as in like out of pack of cards.
Do they grill them? I mean, that's also weird.
You've burnt it, like you've burnt your opportunity. I've always quite liked that phrase. Yeah, it's good.
And you
does the court jester gets out of line? Put him on the grill.
You know what? These people who think they're funny all the time, I think they would sometimes benefit from a firm hand.
I always giggle. They do have this thing. If you get a long-term injury, you can register a new player in the league, and they call it a medical joker, which is one of my favorites for the European. A medical joker.
Ivan on Instagram says, will this season likely be Thomas Müller's last at Bayern? If so, what next for the player who spent his entire career at Munich?
I think he could be. He's still contributing, but is more peripheral really than he's ever been at Bayern, and they've got so many attacking options. Look, if he wants to stay, there'll always be a place for him. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He was really important at the start of Harry Kane arriving because there was a technical click between the two of them. I think him welcoming Kane into the dressing room, and as we know, Bayern are so big on club DNA, was massively important in integrating him, as well as that sort of mutual understanding on the pitch. He can still contribute now, but I do think not only are they freshening up under Kompany, but you look at the technical leaders they have now. They have Michael Olise. Going forward, they've got to decide what they're going to do with Sané, Gnabry, Coman. At least one of them is going to go because they can't possibly afford to keep all of them. And of course, they're out there still looking at Florian Wirtz and Omar Mamouche and talk of them even buying the two of them in the same summer. And I say, if that did happen in the summer of 2025, that would be so depressing. I mean, no slight to Bayern there, but come on, man. Give the rest of the league a chance. I would hate to see that. So the other interesting thing with Thomas Müller and what's been used in Germany this week is that his wife has withdrawn from public life. So she's like, she finds people asking her for interviews and social media attention and all that just a bit tiresome and a bit claustrophobic. So he's been going out to public events and she's not been coming with him. And it's because, she's just sort of withdrawn from that end of it. So I just wonder, I mean, this is just conjecture, I suppose, but whether the Müllers as a pair are just looking at the next bit. They're not like blingy celebrity couple, really. They look after horses and all that sort of stuff. They're quite sort of they almost feel not of the modern world. And just like Thomas Müller as a footballer feels as if he could happily exist in any era of football, and that's an enormous compliment to him. Really, is a compliment to his intelligence and his technical ability. The fact that he's not super fast or ripped or anything like that, and yet he finds a way to affect the game season after season after season in so many different ways. I mean, there's part of me, Lars, that would like to see him go and like play a season or two in a different context, just to see how that works, because he's a connoisseur's footballer, isn't he?
Yeah. So a couple of things here. The fact that his missus doesn't love the public-facing side of being married to a star player. I mean, maybe if he wanted to prolong his career a bit, doing it in a slightly different country would be the way to go. Like the most obvious cliched answer here would be to take some time in the MLS. A lot of footballers have said that they've kind of enjoyed going to America, where they're not as recognizable or even recognizable at all. Some places that's kind of given them a type of life that's super different. I mean, there are plenty of places basically in America. Yeah, there's plenty of places in America where they have a strong sort of horse riding culture. So, I mean, that might be an interesting thing for them as well. Longer term, it seems enormously obvious that he's going to be a manager, right? Like, I kind of don't love... I look at recently retired ex-players as kind of the Nepo babies of coaching. It's like, I always feel a bit for the guys who are trying to make their way up the coaching ladder, and suddenly some newly retired superstar just walks into a big job somewhere. That always feels a bit harsh. But with Thomas Müller, every time you hear him speak, leave aside for a second the idea that they call him Radio Müller because he talks so much to everyone on the pitch, but every time you hear him speak in interviews as well, you can tell he thinks about the game and has ideas, and obviously has a real presence and is a real leader. So it seems like the most open and shut case of a player who's going to be a coach or a manager at some point. But I like the idea of him experiencing something slightly different before he goes there, because he's only ever been at Bayern and with Germany as well. And I think having more experiences under your belt, experiencing maybe a different culture, would be a very useful grounding before he eventually sort of moves into that sort of direction.
So you're not looking at him as a future coach for Bayern then, necessarily?
I think everyone would look at him as a future coach for Bayern if he goes in that direction. I like the idea of him kind of proving himself elsewhere first, though. But
727 appearances for the club.
That's quite something.
Joined them at the age of 10.
Yep.
Yeah, 24 years ago.
So maybe there's the temptation to not go anywhere else and just be the ultimate sort of one-club man. But I just think, other experiences are good.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
It would make his brain explode, though, I'm sure, if he goes to like a slightly dysfunctional club or a place where things aren't quite as good as Bayern. Do you think that would really annoy him?
Yeah, I don't. What you mean? He'd go sort of bookish Roy Keane, something like that. That'd be interesting. But what I would love to see him do is, like, when you talk about one club men, I would love to see him do what like Daniele De Rossi did. Where he just went and played for Boca for 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, just to do something like completely left field, that sort of shows I love football and I've earned the right to do whatever I want. So I'm going to do literally whatever I want.
And if I might just say one word on your bookish Roy Keane, Andy, I got a call from a bloke the other day who said, yeah, one Christmas he was homeless and Roy Keane comes around, gives him a fiver and then walks off, then comes back again, gives him his overcoat. So don't knock Roy Keane. I've changed my view on Roy Keane very drastically since I heard that.
No one's knocking him, but he does have standards, as Lars has pointed out.
He does. I won't lie, he does. Vitali on YouTube asks, after scoring the winning goal for Besiktas against Fenerbahce last weekend, can Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain get his career back on track, Andy?
It would be great if he did, because he has had a difficult time since going to Turkey. So he turns up at Besiktas in the summer of 2023 to, I think, widespread surprise. They have a really bad team, so it's very hard for him to make any sort of impression. He has his moments last season, but it's kind of thought at the end of the season that maybe they'll find a way to move on. He doesn't get the move he wants in the summer of 2024, and partly because they've realised that their destinies are perhaps best suited in different directions. He doesn't play at all. Now, what's changed and why he's in that position to score that goal is because Besiktas did a lot in the transfer market in the summer. They bought in Rafa from Benfica on a free, and who's a brilliant player, a sort of, I guess, like pocket version of Kevin De Bruyne, a really direct sort of playmaker who can score goals as well, great pace. He started the season really well. Jude Bellingham, who also arrived, started the season really well. Jedson Fernandez has been good, and then the form fell off quite badly. And so you go back a couple of weeks, they fire Brad Friedel, the sporting director, and they fired Giovanni van Bronckhorst, the coach. And this has led to Oxlade-Chamberlain coming back in the squad. So he's had 2 little sub-appearances so far. He came on towards the end against Fenerbahce. And I've got to tell you, he did score this goal by accident, by the way. He's looking to find Immobile in the centre. The ball eludes him and ends up in the back of the net. Immobile, like any good striker, celebrates the goal like he actually has scored it when he hasn't touched it. And Oxlade-Chamberlain, even though he scored the winning goal in a derby against Fenerbahce, sort of walks off looking all sort of modest and sheepish. But really, really good to see him playing again. I think the fact that they are traversing this quite difficult period means his experience, especially at really top level, is probably going to be quite valuable. Is he going to play all the games? I mean, he's not played first team football for a very long time. And I think if you add those 2 sub appearances that he's made since the start of December together, I mean, it comes up to about 30 minutes. So in terms of him being able to play proper games, he feels a long way off. And it feels like if he did want to move back to England, I struggle to see him making an impact, having had a truncated pre-season and barely played at all in the first half of the season. To drop him into like a Premier League or a top half championship team, like that sounds like the ultimate workout plan or something really destined to fail, depending on which way you look at it. But yeah, I hope he gets playing again somewhere.
Yeah, Lars, I know you're looking at this from some distance, but nevertheless, can Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain get his career back on track? And what's he got to do?
Just play more football, seems to be. Like, if he's only made 2 substitute appearances all year, that's not a lot. Should play more football. Starting with Besiktas' game against Bodø Glimt next week. There's a Norwegian angle there as well. Yeah, see how they got to travel to... That's going to be an interesting one. Travelling to Bodø in December. Good luck with that, Besiktas. That's going to be tremendous fun.
I feel like Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain now because I scored the goal by accident. Lars is taking all the credit, like Immobile at centre forward, and I'm walking away sheepishly from this conversation. Andy, you see what you did?
I take no credit.
You take it all. Thank you for listening to Ask OTC, and if you'd like to ask a question yourself, you can contact us at any time at Radio Dotun, at Andy Brassel, at Lars Sivertsen, or at OTC Pod, and you can email us otc@footballramble.com.